Welcome back to Basic Business Training 1, and we are happy that you've been able to join us again. In this session, we are going to be looking at ethics. In our last session, we talked about worldview and the importance of having a biblical worldview, but we know that our worldview is not the only thing that dictates how we act. We live in a society that has many different worldviews, but as well as different ethical challenges that we may end up facing. This is a session, again, that would be great to have some dialogue and discussion with. The goal, from my perspective, is not to give you answers about how to handle ethical decisions, because your context and your environment is very different than what the little bit that I know about the world and about the business. And so I'm going to read some scenarios to you, and you will see these scenarios in your workbook as well. And I encourage you to talk through those. And they're not meant to be easy. The thing about ethics is it's not black and white. Things that are black and white, is it right to steal? Is it wrong to steal? That's pretty black and white. But ethics are a challenge because there are multiple layers that are in there, and they really do take discussion. And so our goal in this session is to help begin the discussion of ethical challenges that you have faced, that you are facing, and that you need the support of a church community of other Christ followers who can help you to sort out what to do with those. So let me read you this first scenario. I've got a few that I'll read in the session, and these are all real scenarios that I've encountered in my work with different business people across Africa. And this first one is that a man and woman are running a small shop, a provision shop that sells various goods that are needed by people on a daily basis. They are one of the only shops, though, in that particular area that are selling provisions. They have 4 children, all of whom are in school, and so the children in the home are depending on this particular business to supply them with the income that they need to continue to flourish as a family. One of the things that happened one day is that a 50-kilogram bag of sugar was delivered to that particular business. And what they do when they receive the 50 kg bag is they divide it into 1 kilogram bags that are then sold to customers who are buying their sugar for 1 kilogram at a time. As they are dividing the sugar into bags, they recognize that there's only 47 kilograms of sugar in this bag that was supposed to have 50 kilograms. So they have been shorted by the supplier. What are they to do? The total profit for that 50 kg bag is actually found in only 3 bags of kilograms of sugar, because the profit margin on sugar is very small. It's a commodity that people know what the price is, and it's pretty stable and set. And so what should this business person do? Should he take the loss, knowing the impact that it will have on the business? Or does he this once short each bag a little bit of sugar, a little bit less than 1 kilogram, in order to get the 50 bags that he needs in order to be able to make the profit that he expected to make for this particular sale? This is an ethical challenge. Which of those scenarios does he do, or what would you recommend to this business person considering this particular temptation or ethical challenge that he is facing? So what are ethics? Ethics are the moral principles that govern a person or group's behavior and their sense of right and wrong. They are the moral principles that govern our behavior and our sense of right and wrong. As we talked about in the last session, if we have a biblical worldview, those morals, that sense of right and wrong, is largely going to come from the Bible, but the Bible doesn't always spell out everything about every situation. Another possible definition here is that ethics are knowing the difference between what you have the right to do and what is the right thing to do. I have the right to charge a large amount for a bag of sugar, but is that the right thing to do? Well, first of all, people won't buy it if the price is very high. They'll go to another place. But what is the difference between what I have the right to do and what is the right thing to do? Those are the things that we struggle with in our challenge of ethics. Defining what we will and won't do in a business is important as it relates to ethics. So we have to talk about this. We have to talk about this as a business because those ethical challenges are going to come. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And so having these conversations is critically important. And I've watched business owners over the years who have sat down ahead of time and have said, we will do this, we will not do this, and that becomes very important. So you have to have these conversations in order to define, from your perspective, what is appropriate behavior given your specific business. What are your organizational values? What are the things that you are going to say, this is who we are, this is what we value, this is what it looks like? A lot of people say that excellence is their organizational value. What does that look like? We have to define it. Integrity is another value that a lot of people say our business will have integrity. What does that look like? How do we define that? It's important to have this discussion because we want to nurture individual responsibility. As every person participating in the business, we want to nurture individual responsibility so that we don't have to be watching, but we have instilled that through team meetings, through conversations, through opportunities for us to learn and to talk through some of these challenges together. And lastly, we want to have this conversation in order to provide leadership and oversight in terms of how our business will have a reputation of having ethics. I was talking to a man in Ethiopia who was running a furniture business, and he had worked previously in a furniture business as well. And he started his own, and he and his wife made an agreement that they would not take bribes or pay bribes, in order to get a contract to supply a particular business or a government ministry with furniture. But in order to do that, they had to make a decision to live below their income. They needed to be able to not be down to zero in terms of their own savings, so that if a bribe was asked, they could say, no, we are not paying that, and they might lose that particular contract. And so they made a decision of what appropriate behavior was, and appropriate behavior was going to be to say no to bribes. They had to have a value of integrity and be willing to live that out even when it was painful. And he told me of the many painful times when he would get a call late in the night that said, we're about to award this contract. If you, so-and-so gave me this, if you top that, then you can have the contract. And he had to say no. He had to nurture that individual responsibility in the rest of his team and his staff as well. But it was him as a leader that had to give oversight for that and maintain that. And that was a commitment that they were able to make. The challenge of business ethics, of course, is that there is a constant juggling of profit versus ethics. And that's why in a couple of sessions we're going to be talking about budgeting. And if we do not do our financial management right, the temptation to change our values and not have our values line up with what we actually believe or express that we believe is because we're juggling profit versus ethics. When we are living very close to survival, being ethical sometimes takes a back seat to getting the funds that you need in order to be able to flourish. The code of ethics, by the way, does not produce ethical behavior. You can have a beautiful sign posting all the things that you believe, but that does not produce ethical behavior. What produces ethical behavior is modeling it, living it out, but also talking about it and discussing it and having conversations and having role plays and knowing as a team, as a staff, as a business, as a family, how it is that we are going to have this ethical behavior. Our ethics tend to flow from our core values, and the core values that we profess are not necessarily those by which we live. We might profess integrity, as I said earlier, but maybe we waste time. And that's something we don't often think about. We are on the clock, we are at work, and we are on our phone, or we are on social media. We don't come to work on time, or we leave early. And so we say that we are a person of integrity, but we aren't necessarily living that out. And so we have to really ask ourselves, what are my core values, and how am I displaying those core values to people around me? conflicts of interest also lead to ethical problems where I have a conflict in terms of trying to get a contract and also being able to know that the suppliers for that are going to be family members and so on. And so we have conflicts of interest that can make our ethics challenged and cause us to not always be forthright in how we are able to do the work that God has given us to do. Some of the primary stakeholders as it comes to shaping business ethics are numerous, actually. Our employees help to shape our ethics. Our employees are sometimes on the front line, and they are the ones dealing with customers, and they may change things, and they may make decisions that are unethical. They may do things that are unethical, and it shapes the reputation of the business, especially if we are not monitoring and giving good leadership and helping people to understand how to deal with some of these temptations. Customers are also involved in shaping business ethics. So actually going back to the employees, I remember I was in a particular country and we had stopped for gas, and the driver asked for a receipt for the gas, and the man took his receipt pad and he ripped off, and ended up being 3 receipts, and just signed them and threw them in the car, and there was no amount on there. And so the employee was actually helping the customer be tempted to be able to write in whatever he wanted, turn that in for reimbursement from the company, the business he was working for, and that is something that was not a wise decision or a good decision for the employee. Customers, on the other hand, may also make a demand to change a receipt. I remember working in one particular place, and the story was told to me. We were doing a training, and there was a man from a church, and he said that he was given the mandate to with the elders of the church to buy the pastor a car. And there was a man in the church who actually was selling cars, and so they went together to this car place, and the church had raised a certain amount of money to buy the pastor a new vehicle. And they found a vehicle that they decided on, and it was about $4,000 less than what they had raised. And the elders of the church asked this member of the church to write the receipt for the higher amount than what it was actually there for. And so this member is confused. I mean, his elders are asking him to do this, and so to not do that, of course, in their culture would be disrespectful. On the other hand, he knew that this is an ethical challenge that wouldn't be right for him to do it. And so what he did was the same thing as the gas person did. He signed the receipt, kept it blank, and he gave it to them. And he didn't know what they actually filled out on that receipt. And so our customers can help shape our ethics, and our employees, if we aren't trained well, we can fall into some of those temptations. Our suppliers can also have an impact on our ethics, as we heard with the sugar story. If we are not careful, and if we are not checking what our suppliers are giving, and because of our lack of paying attention, we end up being shorted, then we might be tempted again to short our customers, and there is a challenge in that. The community can help shape our business ethics by the way the community makes demands or says yes or no to different things in terms of what businesses can be located there and how they act and behave. The government definitely has an impact as a stakeholder on business ethics and asking how to do different things. There was, when we were in one country, there was a requirement that everybody, a very high requirement, that all receipts must be turned into the government on a daily basis. And if a receipt was ever not turned in, the fine was very huge. And so businesses there were very diligent to report their receipts and to make sure that the government was paid the taxes. But in a lot of other places, people are afraid to register their business because they don't want to pay the taxes, or they say the tax rate is so high that they are tempted to say that they are selling a lot less so that they pay less taxes. And so the government can have an impact in terms of our temptations of doing things that are not ethical. And of course, if we have shareholders, people who are investing in the business, they may care more about the profit than they do about the customer. They may care more about the profit than they do about the employees. And so our ethics are then shaped by those stakeholders who want to see a certain amount of profit, and so we end up not caring for the customer or for the employee. And of course, there's other things as well, our mass media that we might do. Our ethics are challenged in the way we do our advertising. We want to make promises that we can't necessarily keep. I remember working with a whole group of mushroom farmers, and they were creating these drinks that they said would cure diabetes. And as far as I know, there's no cure for diabetes. And yet they were claiming that if they drank this drink, you would be cured from diabetes. And there's certainly things that we can do to mitigate it. But what we have to remember is that those are some ethical challenges that we face in doing our business as it relates to our media. And of course, other associations that we are joining in with. This particular group was with a mushroom association, and they had made some sort of research that allowed them to make some claims that felt like they were false. We also have competitors who may challenge us and shape our ethics as we are looking at what they are doing. And, if they do it and we don't do it, we are going to suffer. And so therefore, we begin to do these things. And so ethics enter every part of our business. It enters our bookkeeping. It enters our marketing. It enters, our foundation. Our foundation begins to crack and weaken when we declare with our mouths that we are disciples of God and that we are going to do our business with good ethics. And then very quickly, temptation enters in and we begin to move away from that. Let me read you another scenario, a challenge of business ethics. You are an administrator of a school that is doing very well with 300 students. You get some rare funds from the government to build an additional building for that school. For this particular contract that you have received from the government, they were late in distributing the funds. You're not sure whether they were late on purpose or not, but regardless, you got the funds and you had to use that money within 2 weeks. At the end of the 2 weeks, they had required you to return the money because that contract was ending. And so you can't build a building in 2 weeks. And so you have a challenge. You could return that money at the end of 2 weeks. Just do what you can in 2 weeks, return that money knowing that it's going to go through the local government, to the city government, to the state government, to the federal government. And probably along the way it will get eaten and it won't actually make its way back to the federal government. Or you could forge receipts, and you could change the receipts to say, this is for the good of the school, and I'm a good person, and these students really need this building, and this village, this town needs this building, and if I return the money, it's just going to go in the pockets of corrupt politicians anyways. I feel like I need to do this. These are challenging situations, and the temptation is real for us to be able to justify our behavior and to do things that may be contrary to what the Bible is asking us to do. But there are some real challenges in how some systems work and how some systems function. And so I want to ask you a few true and false questions for you to think through. Which of these statements are true? Number one, it is easy to be ethical. It is easy to be ethical. Would you say that that's true or that's false? I hope you said false, because it is not easy to be ethical. That's one of the challenges that we see in so much of the marketplace, and it's sometimes why we have that reaction to come out of the marketplace and work in a Christian organization or for a Christian ministry, because there it's not difficult to be ethical. Well, the reality is it's difficult to be ethical in Christian environments as well, maybe not as difficult. But it is not easy to be ethical. We have to be diligent. The Bible talks about the devil roaming around looking for ways to trip us up, and that Satan loves things to remain in darkness so that we do something, we justify it in our head. And actually what happens is when you violate your own ethics, your conscience becomes seared. Your conscience is something that has to be educated. It's not something that you have and it stays the same way. Your conscience can be educated that what you did is what you have to do to survive, and therefore it's okay. And so when your conscience starts to do that, you have now to begin changing the way your conscience is if you want to return back to a biblical worldview. And so what we find is it's kind of like scar tissue that builds up in your conscience, that as your brain begins to do things that it doesn't actually believe in, your brain has to figure out a way to make it right. Imagine you profess that you are a person of integrity and you are in charge of handling the finances of your church, and then all of a sudden you run into a situation in your home that your child needs school fees tomorrow or they will be kicked out of school. And you look at the money that is from your church in your home, in your hand, and you think, you know what, I'm going to pay this right back. And so you take it, you bring it to the school to pay for the school fees, and then something else happens, and you're not able to pay it back. And so you say that you are a person of integrity, and now you have done this thing, and your brain doesn't like it because you said you're a person of integrity, and you're not acting with integrity. And so what the brain begins to do is to say, you know what, you didn't have a choice. You have to justify it. Your child had to go to school, and you had good intentions to pay it back, and you'll still get back to it, and then it might happen again and again and again, and we continue to justify it in our own heads. So is it easy to be ethical? It's not easy to be ethical. Second one, true or false? Unethical behavior is part of business. Unethical behavior is part of business. And again, the answer is false. We have heard a number of people say to us, in order to survive, that's what you have to do. That's the way the world is, and I am going to do that as well so that I can continue to be doing my business. But from God's perspective, God is the owner of your business, and if we fully trust that He is the owner, we cannot say that unethical behavior is part of doing business because God is not an unethical God, and we are to fulfill the owner's requirements for doing business His way. Yes, it may mean challenges. Yes, it may mean significant financial challenges. In fact, people have closed businesses because of recognizing that they can't function, they can't do their business ethically and do it God's way and still survive. And so there are ramifications for saying that God is the owner of our business, but we believe that being unethical is not an option when we are doing our business unto the Lord. The third, there are no rewards for being ethical. True or false? There are no rewards for being ethical. And again, we would say the answer would be false. There might not be the financial rewards that you are able to see or identify, but contentment and peace of heart, the ability to sleep, having a clear conscience, that is a reward that is huge. Living out a testimony and being affirmed for that. The man that I told you about with the furniture store, he began to say no to paying bribes in order to get contracts. And after some time, the government people recognized that he was somebody that refused to pay the bribes, and suddenly they recognized him as an honest person, and his business ended up growing significantly based on his integrity and his ethics, rather than the money that he was losing in the beginning. Does that reward always come in a financial package? It does not. We can't promise that. God does not promise to reward us financially, but He does promise to give us the peace, the contentment, the joy of doing our work God's way and fulfilling His calling and being a testimony and a light in a place of darkness in our business. Fourth, ethical behaviors will prevent me from being successful. Kind of looks like the other one that we just talked about. Ethical behavior will prevent me from being successful. And again, we want to say false to that. You're seeing a pattern of a lot of falses. Ethical behavior does not prevent you from being successful. It may prevent you from having certain contracts or certain opportunities, but your success cannot be defined only in financial terms. Your success is to be an image of God bearer in every place that you are doing your work and to carry forth that image. And your success may be that you are an ambassador of Jesus and fulfilling His call to provide goods and services that will help the world to flourish. That is success. Success is not defined by the amount of money that we have. Success is defined by living a godly life and being a disciple and being a testimony to that. Last, business, true or false, business is like a sport. Push the rules and try not to get caught. And that is how some people like to play it. It's a game. How much can I get away with? How close can I get to the line before crossing it? And of course, we want to say that is false. Again, God has required us, given us a mandate for how we are to do our work, and we need to live into that. We see many ethical challenges in the workplace today. from those who are Christian, from those who are not Christian. And of course, this stems all the way back to Adam and Eve and some of the challenges that happened right after the fall. And so I just want to talk about a few of those challenges that we see in the workplace. The first is disruption in relationships. We become people who are seeking power. And we have seen too many times that as I look for power and for prestige for myself, I tend to step on other people as I try to climb that ladder. And so relationships become destructive within the workplace. We also know that gossip is something that can tear people down in our relationships in the workplace. And sometimes we try to go to church and we have had these heavy burdens on us during the week, and we need a place that we can bring our lament to God as well and continue to express that to Him and ask for prayer for how to love my person, my colleague, the people who are causing me this pain and struggle, and how to be a testimony in those areas. Another ethical challenge are unsafe working conditions. And we know that there are some countries that have very high standards of safety that are required for businesses to be able to function. And because of those high standards of safety, the prices also go up because there's more cost involved for us to have a safe environment for our employees. Other countries have very low standards of safety, and because of that low standard, then it means that the prices can be low. And so as Christians, what is our ethical obligation to our employees? And if my price has to go high because I'm protecting them, I might actually have to close the business and they will lose their jobs. What do I do as a Christian in that situation? Another challenge is how much to pay our employees. And one of the things that I have heard from people over and over and over again over the years is that we can't find good, trustworthy, honest employees that we can trust with our business. And one of the things I say is something that my mother taught me growing up, that when you point the finger at other people, there are these three fingers that are pointing back at you. And so my question to business owners is, how much do your employees recognize that they are part of the team? How much do they recognize that if the business prospers, they too will prosper? Or do they see that you are taking the profit for yourself, that they may perceive you as stealing from them, and therefore they think it's okay to steal from you, either physically or in terms of time and in terms of effort and excellence? And so those are some things that we have to consider as we see owners continue to grow in their own profit, which is their right to do. But also we have to ask the question then, what is the right thing to do as they think about their employees and how much to pay them? Do we pay a living wage? Do we pay the minimum wage? Do we pay lower than the minimum wage? Those are things as Christians we need to talk about and explore to see what other people are doing and how they are doing it, and how can I keep my business open and still pay people something that will allow them to flourish as well. Next, we want to think about the payment of bribes, which is another challenge that exists in many places. How do we live in an environment that demands these bribes? And we know that when we pay a bribe, we're participating in corruption. But we also know that if we don't pay the bribe, our business might close down. One of the things that I've learned over the years is that it's not possible to say to somebody, you must stop paying bribes today because you are a Christian. We need to learn how to grow into this and gather together, to link arms together as Christians to say, what can we do to make a change? One of the things in one of the countries where I worked was we were tired of tax officials making claims for taxes to be paid and threatening people by saying that if they didn't pay this exorbitant amount of tax, which was not actually what they owed, that the tax officials said they would then shut the business down. And so out of fear, people were paying bribes so that their business could stay open. And what we did is we educated ourselves. What is the real amount of tax that we need to pay given our profit, given our business sales? And what we found out that what people were paying in bribes was more than what they would have had to pay in taxes. And so we gathered together about 4,000 businesses, and we called the president of the country, who actually came to listen, and we said, we're happy to pay the taxes, but we will no longer pay anything without a receipt. And basically we were sending the message to tax officials that we know how much we need to pay, and we will no longer be paying bribes. And so we can do that together. It's very difficult to say if we stop paying bribes today, our business will close tomorrow. There has to be a process. We did not get to where we are overnight. We're not going to get out overnight. But we have to be able to talk about it and figure out together and brainstorm together. And what I have seen, and I hope that you do this after this session today, that when you get together, you are going to be problem solving and helping each other with amazing ideas, because some of you have figured out how to navigate the system and still do business and not pay the bribes. And others of us are struggling to figure it out, and so we need each other and we need to share together. People judge themselves based on their own intentions. Others are judged based on their behavior, but everybody is accountable for their actions. And I love the idea of that. We are judged based on our intentions, but we judge others based on their behavior. So when we do something, we say, well, you have to understand this was my situation. But when others look at you, they don't understand that. They only see what you did. And so we have to understand that there are two perspectives in this. We are accountable for our behavior, especially as Christ followers. So what does it mean to be an ethical business person? How do ethics relate to salaries and benefits for both your employees and for yourself? How do ethics relate to manufacturing regarding the durability or the quality of the product? How do ethics relate to pricing? And we'll talk more about that in our pricing class. What other areas of business are affected by ethics? And I'm sure that you can name many of them. So what we have to do as we look at our ethics is we have to ask the questions, is the action legal? If it's not legal, that's an obvious answer right there. The second question, does the action that we want to do violate the mission of the business? And that's why it's important that we identify the mission and that we identify the owner. Does the action that we are about to take violate the mission of the business? Who is affected and how by the action that we are going to take? We need to look at all the ramifications, not just our immediate ramification, but who else will be affected? And how does this action appear through the lens of a biblical worldview? And that's something as well that we want to consider from the Bible's perspective. There's a saying that says, if you have ethics, nothing else matters. If you don't have ethics, nothing else matters. And that's because at the end of the day, if you decide that you are not going to live and do your work in an ethical way, it's going to impact everything. If you do and decide that you are going to live according to the ethics that you have declared, it will also impact everything. And so that's something that we have to consider. And I pray that you will pray about this, that you will consider this, that you will have the courage to speak out things that maybe you have done in the darkness and they need to come to the light. And we need to ask for that forgiveness, and we need to dialogue together how to do this better the next time. I've seen many business people do this and share, and there's a load that is lifted when we can confess these things and say, I want to do it better, and then be held accountable for how to do that. So I pray that you take these questions to heart and that you will consider them, and we look forward to being with you in the next session where we will continue to look at how we can do our business to the glory of God. God bless you.